Hello everybody, welcome back. I've got a special episode for you today. I'm going to call this one Digging in the Shelves. Now I did a recent hip-hop collection video by that name recently. Thanks to everybody that watched and commented on that one. That kind of went into a bit of detail about my interest in hip-hop and what role it played in my role as a music listener and becoming a music collector down the line. And I thought that got me thinking maybe I would expand on it a bit, go through some of the other phases I went through, some of the formative periods of my interest in music. When I watch vinyl community intro videos, that's always kind of the thing that interests me most, when people talk a bit about themselves, their background, what led to where they are now, becoming a vinyl collector, making videos. So I always gravitate towards that, and I tried to do a few comments like that on my own vinyl community intro several years ago, and a little bit here and there since, but I thought I would go into a bit more detail. Right now I'm going to look at kind of a trilogy, with the hip-hop one kind of being the middle section. So what I'm going to do right now is go way back to my very earliest phases of discovering music. Now first off, I've got a bit of a dilemma maybe you guys can help me out with. I inherited some records from my mom and dad's collection. Now my mom passed away a couple of years ago, and she had left her records behind. My dad has recently retired from his job. He is downsizing his house. He's packing all his stuff up. So we were over there helping him one day, and the old stash of records is down there in the basement. So I was going through there. There's really nothing there that's really worth bringing into the collection. The titles that I'd sort of be interested in, I already have better conditioned copies of, but my kid was picking out a few just kind of based on covers. He's got a little bit of an interest in records, and there were some that I felt bad ending up going to a thrift store or getting thrown in the garbage, so I had to kind of save those. Don't really know what I'm going to do with them right now. Most of them are in bad condition. They're pretty common thrift store records, but I'm going to show you a few things. First up, actually, I'd forgotten this was even still in there. This was actually my very first record that I owned. My parents bought this for me when I was about probably 8 years old. Star Wars soundtrack. I saw the movie in the theaters with my dad in 1977. Big fan. I lived and breathed Star Wars. Had the poster from this on my bedroom wall. I've been looking for I have another copy of this in my collection already. I'd forgotten this was still in my parents' basement, but I've never been able to find one with the poster. And this one actually I was surprised to see is still in really good shape, except for the cover wear, not being stored properly all those years. So it was kind of nice to see that one again. Now there were some records from my dad that my son pulled out. First off, this was one my dad played all the time when I was young. You can see it's coming apart there. Marty Robbins. My dad used to play that all the time. Is there a more dad record than that? He also had lots of bagpipe, marching band records. Like I say, this is bad stuff, guys. I apologize. It gets better. Another one. Now getting into my mom's records, the Fisher Choir. This was definitely one she had around. She used to play this, listen to it. She had a couple more interesting ones. Elvis's Golden Records. This has got some bad coverware, but vinyl's actually not in bad shape, but this is one I have already in my collection. Now I guess in her early days she was a bit of a folkie. She had got a couple of those kind of records back when they were new, and she still had them. Peter, Paul and Mary, See What Tomorrow Brings. Blue Warner Brothers label there. That's another one I already have in my collection. And In the Wind, the gold label. And these are not in great condition. My copies are much better. It's just, I don't know, I didn't feel right letting them go to the landfill or the thrift store. And she had this one, Judy Collins, Whales and Nightingales, on Electro. This was kind of a weird one for when I remember listening to it, with whale sounds in between the tracks. And this isn't the Judy Collins one I see too often. I would probably pick up a better conditioned copy of that if I did see it, but so far I haven't. Now those were records my parents had from when they were younger. I guess they were never huge music fans, but they would have their few records, and then as after I came along, I guess other things took over their interest. They weren't too keen on music anymore. Once I started getting into my early teens, discovering the radio and the pop top 40 sounds of the day, I also started getting interested in going back and seeing what had come before, where this music that I was hearing kind of originated from, going back to the music of my parents' generation, the 50s rock and roll, 60s of course. And so my mom kind of got interested in records again. We started going around to flea markets and things like that. And back then, when I went back several years later, and the flea markets had kind of changed to resellers. These guys had their big tables of just goods they're reselling. But back when we were going, this is probably going back to the early 1980s, you would have these tables of people literally clearing stuff out of their houses they didn't want anymore. And there would be these tables of with these old hippies getting rid of their old records and stuff. So we would buy these things for $1 or $2 or whatever it was and check things out. One of them we bought back then, a treasury of great contemporary hits. Dunhill. This has got a lot of Mamas and Papas on here. Steppenwolf, Three Dog Night, all that kind of late 60s stuff. I definitely know all these songs very well. This was probably my introduction to a lot of them. My mom liked Roy Orbison. I think I bought this for her on one of her birthdays or maybe Christmas or something. Fortunately, not really in great shape anymore, and might be one I have in my collection already. I'd have to check. One of the ones we were picking up was a lot of those kind of K-Tel rock and roll revival type compilations. I was learning about all those songs that had come before. One of the artists that we got into was Jan and Dean. Jan and Dean story, K-Tel. Also got into the Beach Boys. This one, Volume 2, Capitol reissue. And one that my mom had that we bought together back in those days, probably for $1 or something, that I already brought into my collection after she passed away, was Pet Sounds, nice mono copy. Could not let this one stay in the basement. Capitol Rainbow. Cover's pretty beat up. Definitely got some light scuffs and scratches on the vinyl, but actually plays really well. So I was happy to bring that in my collection. It's like 3 copies of this LP I have now. I got that one. I got the twofer with the Carl and the Passions one, and then I got a different pressing with the brown cover variation. As I was learning about that, of course, I was checking out the music of the day. First LP I think I ever bought with my own money was Duran Duran, Rio. Still have it, obviously. Still in the shrink. Still in really nice condition. Probably haven't played this for years. And as I was keeping up with that music, everything sounded new and exciting on the radio back then. The radio was my main vehicle for learning about music. I don't know if that's still the case for anybody today, but I would be tuning into my little clock radio or whatever it was, the top 40 stations, then checking into the classic rock stations. There was a show on at lunchtime every day, every weekday, called The Electric Lunch, that would play psychedelic rock. Not really anything too heavy, but definitely there would be tunes like Spill the Wine, Eric Burdon and War, and King Crimson, In the Court of the Crimson King, I remember being introduced to via that show. And huge for me at that time was discovering the Beatles. None of these are my original copies. The music I was buying then, some of the pop stuff of the day I was buying on vinyl. Then gradually I switched to cassette. The Beatles Red and Blue compilations, I definitely had those on cassette. My original copies long since gone. And it was interesting, when I first started checking out the Beatles, I much preferred the early stuff, the Red compilation, and then within a couple of years, the Blue one took over. And that was huge for me. Court of the Crimson King. Again, just picked this one up relatively recently. When I got into collecting vinyl, I sort of made it a mission to go back and and find all those songs I'd grown up with on the radio, have a physical copy of them on vinyl. Many of them took quite a long time to find. Some of them were pretty easy. Court of the Crimson King I just found within the last couple of years, I guess. I found the right copy at the right price. But I was also taping a lot of stuff on the radio. Most of those tapes have long since disintegrated or gotten chewed up or been lost. But I still have a few of them around. This is probably the oldest one I could find. I was digging in my tapes for this video. A little box. I haven't been able to play any of these in years. I haven't had a tape player. But I found this one. This was stuff I would have taped off the radio. My little hand-drawn track list. I got Cyndi Lauper on here. A bunch of Eurythmics. Owner of a Lonely Heart. Yes. The Police. What is it? Go-Go's. Flock of Seagulls. All the classic 80s stuff is on here. Probably by the mid-80s, I had switched from vinyl to cassette. All of those are long gone. The only one, for some reason, I still have left, An American Prayer by the Doors. I went through a massive, massive Doors phase, probably when I was probably 18, 19, 20, around there. Bought all the albums, all long since gone. I probably saved this one because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get it on any other format. So that was kind of my initial forays into learning about music. First off, the music my parents exposed me to, which now that my mom's gone and I've inherited these records, I've kind of gradually been coming to the realization that they were more of an influence on me becoming a music fan, a music collector than I realized at first. My parents were, as I've said, never had that many records. Probably the coolest record in our house growing up, my dad had the single of My Sweet Lord by George Harrison off the All Things Must Pass album, which I have my own copy of that now. But, you know, they just had a little handful of things. But in little ways I've seen that that's what they did have has influenced my tastes. So I'm going to leave it off for there, guys. That was kind of my first forays into music, as I said. First of all, discovering the music that was of my generation, that was current at the time, and then going back and learning about the music of my parents' generation and leading up to then. So by the 80s, I guess I had sort of lost interest in the current music, and that was right about the time I discovered my interest in hip-hop, which leads into my earlier video, which is now part 2. So I'm going to make one more video, and that should be about a trilogy. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope this was sort of interesting, sort of relevant. Cheers, and take care.